When Donald Trump and Keir Starmer shook hands in the Oval Office, they were announcing a landmark economic breakthrough. They had just signed the US-UK Economic Prosperity Deal, a framework designed to reshape the trading relationship between the two nations. The deal made significant promises. It aimed to slash red tape, secure critical supply chains for steel and aluminum, and provide a long-term boost to the special relationship through reciprocal market access. But just hours after the signing, Washington announced a sweeping 10% surcharge on imports from 60 different trading partners. Citing concerns over forced labor, the administration applied this duty to nearly 99% of all U.S. imports, placing both the UK and the European Union in the same tax bracket. The celebration in London stalled almost immediately. A bilateral triumph was suddenly challenged by a global trade policy that threatened to cancel out the very gains the New Deal was supposed to deliver. Officially, Downing Street downplayed the risk. Because the UK and the EU were assigned the same 10% rate, government spokespeople claimed there was no negative change to the relative competitiveness of British business. Industry leaders saw it differently. The British Chambers of Commerce warned that despite the matching numbers, the UK had just lost its comparative advantage to mainland Europe. This shift was forced by a legal technicality. In February, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down the administration's previous tariff regime, forcing the White House to use a different section of the 1974 Trade Act, a move that effectively reset the rules for everyone. The United States is now levying a 10% tax on the UK and an identical 10% on the European Union. Yet one region faces a severe economic penalty, while the other has just been handed a pricing edge. This divergence is built into the calculation methods. The actual cost to a manufacturer is determined by how these new duties interact with existing baseline trade regulations. For the UK, the new 10% duty is an add-on. Under the Economic Prosperity Deal, it functions as a surcharge that stacks directly on top of Standard Most Favored Nation, or MFN, rates. A British jumper faces a 12.5% tariff. Adding the 10% surcharge creates a 22.5% tax, wiping out profits. Meanwhile, the EU's Turnberry deal capped rates at 10%. Side by side, a European jumper faces less than half the British tax burden. Because the EU negotiated a ceiling while the UK accepted a surcharge, European manufacturers gained a structural pricing advantage that British firms simply cannot match. The UK did secure some specific exemptions. The New Deal includes preferential rates and carve-outs for high-value sectors like automotive manufacturing and aerospace, protecting them from the worst of the stacking effect. Scotch whisky also secured a major victory, with tariffs reduced to zero. This gives Scottish distillers a substantial pricing lead over their rivals in Ireland and France, who still face the 10% duty. But those protections are limited to a narrow list of industries. General goods outside those exemptions, from bicycles and clothing to chemicals and gifts, are left fully exposed to the cumulative 22.5% rate. This strategy creates a divided domestic lottery. Some sectors enjoy a protective shield, while the rest of the economy must fend for itself, without the blanket protection afforded to the European trading bloc. The consequences extend beyond individual products. Analysis from Aston University suggests that in a fractured global economy, full-scale trade conflicts could lead to a global welfare loss of $1.4 trillion. This incident highlights the disparity in geopolitical leverage. An independent nation negotiating on its own lacks the sheer gravity of an integrated trading bloc that represents 5 times its total GDP. In the UK, this tariff disparity is fueling a new political argument. Pro-European groups are using these figures to lobby for immediate economic reintegration with the EU to avoid being left behind in a global trade war. For now, London is stuck in a reactive cycle. Officials are being forced back to the negotiating table in Washington, hoping to secure further piecemeal exemptions just to equalize their position with Europe. Press conferences in the Oval Office may signal a strong relationship, but in the brutal arithmetic of global trade, raw collective leverage is what determines the winners and losers. For a full breakdown of the math behind the EU's tariff edge and live updates on the latest trade negotiations,